Hello and welcome to a reading of Coming Up for Air by George Orwell. Part 1, Chapter 1. The idea really came to me the day I got my new false teeth. I remember the morning well. At 7:45, I nipped out of bed and got into the bathroom just in time to shut the kids out. It was a beastly January morning with a dirty yellowish-gray sky. Down below, out of the little square of bathroom window, I could see the 10 yards by 5 of grass with a privet hedge around it and a bare patch in the middle that we called the back garden. There's the same back garden, same pivots, the same green behind every house in the Ellesmere Road. Only difference where there are no kids, there's no bare patch in the middle. I was trying to shave with a bluntish razor blade while the water ran into the bath. My face looked back at me out of the mirror, and underneath, in a tumbler of water on the little shelf over the wash basin, the teeth that belonged to my face. It was temporary set that the Warner my dentist had given me to wear while the new ones were being made. I haven't such a bad face, really. It's one of those bricky red faces that go with butter-colored hair and a pale blue eyes. I've never gone gray or bald, thank God, and when I've got my teeth in, I probably don't look my age, which is about 45. Making a mental note to buy razor blades, I got into the bath and started soaping. I soaped my arms. I've got those kind of pudgy arms that are freckled up to the elbow, and then took the back brush and soaped my shoulder blades, which in the ordinary way I can't reach. It's a nuisance, but there are several parts of my body which I can't reach nowadays. The truth is that I'm inclined to be a little bit on the fat side. I don't mean that I'm like something in a sideshow at a fair. My weight isn't much over 14 stones, and last time I measured round my waist it was either 48 or 49. I forget which. And I'm not what they call distinguishedly fat. I haven't got one of those bellies that sag halfway down to the knees. It's merely that I'm a little bit broad in the beam, with a tendency to be barrel-shaped. Do you know that an active, healthy kind of fat man, the athletic, bouncy type, that's nicknamed Fatty or Tubby, and is always the life and sound of the party? I'm that type. Fatty, they mostly call me Fatty Bowling. George Bowling is my real name. But at the moment, I don't feel that life and soul of the party, and it struck me that nowadays I nearly always do have a morose kind of feeling in the early mornings, although I sleep well and my digestion's good. I knew what it was, of course. It was those bloody false teeth. The things were magnified by the water in the tumbler, and they were grinning at me like the teeth in a skull. It gives you a rotten feeling to have your gums meet, a sort of pinched-up, withered feeling, like you've been bitten into a sour apple. Besides, say what you will, false teeth are a landmark. When your last natural tooth goes, the time when you can kid yourself that your Hollywood chic is definitely at an end. And I was fat, as well as 45, as I stood up to soap my crotch. I had a look at my figure. It's all rot about fat men being unable to see their feet, but it's a fact that when I stand upright I can only see the front halves of mine. No woman, I thought as I worked the soap around my belly, will ever look twice at me again unless she's paid to. Not that at the moment I particularly wanted any woman to look twice at me. But it struck me that in the mornings were reasons why I ought to have been in a better mood. To begin with, I wasn't working today. The old car in which I covered my district, I have to tell you that I'm in the insurance business, the Flying Salamander, life, fire, burglary, twins, shipwrecks, everything, was temporarily in dock, and though I'd got to look in at the London office to drop some papers, I was really taking the day off to go and fetch my new false teeth. And besides, there was another business that had been in and out of my mind for some time past. This was that I had 17 quid which nobody else had heard about. Nobody in the family, that is. It had happened this way. A chap in our firm, Mellors by name, had got hold of a book called Astrology Applied to Horse Racing, which proved that it's all the question of influence of the planets on the colors the jockey is wearing. Well, in some race or other, there was a mare called Corsair Bride, a complete outsider, but her jockey's color was green, which it seemed was just the color for the planet that happened to be in the ascendant. Mellors, who was deeply bitten with the astrology business, was putting several quid on the horse and went down on his knees to me to do the same. In the end, cheerfully to shut him up, I risked 10 bob. Though I don't bet as a general rule, sure enough, Corsair's bribe came home in a walk. I forget the exact odds, but my share worked out at 17 quid. By a kind of instinct, rather queer and probably indicating another landmark in my life, I just quietly put the money in the bank and said nothing to anybody. I'd never done anything of this kind before. A good husband and father would have spent it on a dress for Hilda, that's my wife, and boots for the kids, but I've been a good husband and father for 15 years, and I was beginning to get fed up with it. After I soaped myself all over, I felt better and laid down in the bath to think about my 17 quid and what to spend it on. The alternatives, it seemed to me, were either a weekend with a woman or dribbling it quietly away on odds and ends, such as cigars and double whiskeys. I just turned on some more hot water and was thinking about women and cigars when there was a noise like a herd of buffaloes coming down the 2 steps that led to the bathroom. 2 kids in a house the size of ours is like a quart of beer in a pint mug. There was a fantastic stamping outside, then a yell of agony. Dada, I want to come in. Well, you can't. Clear out. But Dada, I want to go somewhere. Go somewhere else, then. I hope. I'm having my bath. Dada, I want to go somewhere. No use. I knew the danger signal. The water closet is in the bathroom. It would be, of course, in a house like ours. I hooked the plug out of the bath and got partly dry as quick as I could. As I opened the door, little Billy, my youngest, aged 7, shot past me, dodging the smack which I aimed at his head. It was only when I was nearly dressed and looking for a tie that I discovered that my neck was still soapy. It's a rotten thing to have a soapy neck. It gives you a disgusting, sticky feeling, and the queer thing is that however careful you sponge it away, when you've discovered that your neck is soapy, you feel sticky for the rest of the day. I went downstairs in a bad temper and ready to make myself disagreeable. Our dining room, like other dining rooms in Ellesmere Road, is a poke little place 14 feet by 12, or maybe it was 12 by 10. The Japanese oak sideboard, which the 2 empty descendants, and the silver egg stand that Hilda's mother gave me for the wedding present doesn't leave much room. Old Hilda was glooming behind the teapot in her usual state of alarm and dismay because the new Chronicle had announced that the price of butter was going up, or something. She hadn't lighted the gas fire, and though the windows were shut and it was beastly cold, I bent down and put a match to the fire, breathing rather loudly through my nose, bending, always making me puff and blow, as a kind of hint to Hilda. She gave me the little sidelong glance that was always giving me when she thinks I'm doing something extravagant. Hilda is 39, and when I first knew her, she looked just like a hare, so she does still. But she's got very thin and rather wheezed, with a perpetual brooding, worried look in her eyes, and when she's more upset than usual, she's got a trick of humping her shoulders and folding her arms across her breasts like an old gypsy woman over her fire. She's one of those women who get their main kick in life out of foreseeing disasters. Only petty disasters, of course. As for wars, earthquakes, plagues, famines, and revolutions, she pays no attention to them. Butter is going up, and the gas bill is enormous, and the kids' boots are wearing out, and there's another installment due on the radio. That's Hilda's litany. She gets what I'm finally deciding is a definite pleasure out of rocking herself to and fro with her arms across her breasts and glooming at me. But George, it's very serious. I don't know what we're going to do. I don't know where the money's coming from. You don't see to realize how serious it is, and so on and so forth. It's fixed firmly in her head, and that shall end up in the workhouse. Blah, blah. It's fixed firmly in her head that we shall end up in the workhouse. The funny thing is that we are ever to go to the workhouse, Hilda won't mind it a quarter as much as I shall. In fact, she'll probably rather enjoy the feeling of security. The kids were downstairs already, having washed and dressed at a lightning speed, as they always do when there's no chance to keep anyone else out of the bathroom. When I got to the breakfast table, they were having an argument which went on to the tune of, "Yes, you did. No, you didn't. Yes, you did. No, I didn't." It looked like going on the rest of the morning until I took them to cheese it. Told them. No, he said told, yeah. There are only the 2 of them, Billy, age 7, and Lorna, age 11. It's a peculiar feeling that I have toward the kids. A great deal of the time I can hardly stick the sight of them. As for their conversations, it's just unbearable. They're at the dreary bread and butter age where a kid's mind revolves around things like rulers, pencil boxes, and who got top marks in French. At other times, especially when they're asleep, I have quite a different feeling. Sometimes I've stood over their cots on summer evenings when it's light and watched them sleeping, which, with their round faces and their tow-colored hair, several shades lighter than mine, and it given me the feeling you read about in the Bible when it says your bowels yearn. At such times, I feel that I'm just a kind of dried-up seed pod that doesn't matter 2 pence, and that my sole importance was being to bring these creatures into the world and feed them while they're growing. But that's only a moment. Most of the time, my separate existence looks pretty important to me. I feel that there's life in the old dog yet and plenty of good times ahead, and the notion of myself as kind of a tammy, dreary dairy cow for a lot of women and kids to chase up and down doesn't appeal to me. We didn't talk much at breakfast. Hilda wasn't in her I don't know what we're going to do mood, partly owing to the price of butter and partly because the Christmas holidays were nearly over and there was still £5 owing on the school fees for last term. I ate my boiled egg and spread a piece of bread with golden crown marmalade. Hilda with persistent buying the stuff. It's 5 pence, halfpenny a pound, and the label tells you, in the smallest print that allows it, that it contains a certain proportion of neutral fruit juice. This started me off in the rather irritating way I have sometimes talked about neutral fruit trees, wondering what they looked like and what countries they grew in, until finally Hilda got angry. It's not that she minds me chipping her, it's only that in some obscure way she thinks it's wicked to make jokes about anything you save money on. I had a look at the paper, but there wasn't much news. Down in Spain, over in China, there were murders, on another as usual, a woman's legs that had been found in the railway waiting room, and King Zog's wedding was wavering in the balance. Finally, at about 10 o'clock, rather early than I had intended, I started out for the town. The kids had gone off to play in the Republic Gardens. It was a beastly raw morning. As I stepped out of the front door, a nasty little gust of wind caught the soapy patch on the back of my neck and made me suddenly feel that my clothes didn't fit and that I was sticky all over. Coming up for air, George Orwell, Chapter 2. Do you know the road I live on? Ellesmere Road, West Bletchley. Even if you don't, you know 50 others exactly like it. You know how these streets fester all over in inner outer suburbs, always the same, long rows of little semi-detached houses. The numbers in Ellesmere Road run to 212 and ours is 191. As much alike as council houses and generally uglier, the stucco front, the cress-sodded gate, the privet hedge, the green front door. The laurels, the myrtles, the hawthorns, Mon Abri, Mon Repis, Belle Vue, at perhaps one house and 50 other some antisocial type. You'll probably end in the workhouse has painted his front door blue instead of green. That sticky feeling round my neck had put me into a demoralized kind of mood. It's curious how it gets you down to have a sticky neck. It seems to take all the bounce out of you, like when you suddenly discover in a public place that the sole of one of your shoes is coming off. I had no illusions about myself that morning. It was almost as if I could stand at a distance and watch myself coming down the road with my fat and red face and my false teeth and my vulgar clothes. A chap like me is incapable of looking into it like a gentleman. Even if you saw me at 200 yards distance, you'd know immediately. Perhaps that was an instant not perhaps that was the insurance business, but that I was some kind of tout or salesman. The clothes I was wearing were particularly the uniform of the tribe. Grey herringbone suit, a bit the worse for a wear, blue overcoat costing 50 shillings, bowler hat and no gloves, and I've got the look that is peculiar to people who sell things on commission, a kind of coarse, brazen look. My best moment, when I've got a new suit or when I'm smoking a cigar, I might pass for a bookie or a publican. And when they are very bad, I might be touching vacuum cleaners, but at ordinary times you'd place me correctly. 5 to 10 quid a week, you'd say as soon as you saw me. Economically and socially, I'm about as average level of Ellesmere Road. I had the street pretty much to myself. The men had bunched to catch the 8.21, and the women were fiddling with the gas stoves. When you've time to look about you, and when you happen to be in the right mood, it's a thing that makes you laugh inside to walk down these streets in the inner outer suburbs and think of the lives that go on there. Because after all, what is a road like Ellesmere Road? Just a prison with the cells all in a row. A line of semi-detached torture chambers where the poor little 5 to 10 pounds a weekers quake and shiver, every one of them, with the boss twisting his tail and his wife riding him like a nightmare and the kids sucking his blood like leeches. There's a lot of rot talked about the suffering of the working class. I'm not so sorry for the proles myself. Did you ever know a navvy who lay awake thinking about the sack? The prole suffers physically, but he's a free man when he isn't working. But in every one of those little stucco boxes there's some poor bastard who's never free except when he's fast asleep and dreaming that he's got the boss down the bottom of a well and is bumping lumps of coal at him. Bunging. Of course, the basic trouble with the people like us, I said to myself, is that we all imagine we've got something to lose. To begin with, 9/10 of the people in Ellesmere Road are under the impression that they own their house. Ellesmere Road and the whole quarter surrounding it, until you get to the High Street, is part of a huge racket called the Hurstbrides Estate, the property of the Cheerful Credit Building Society. Building societies are probably the cleverest racket of modern times. My own line insurance is a swindle, I admit, but it's an open swindle with the cards on the table. But the beauty of the building society swindle is that your victim thinks you're doing them a kindness. You wallop them and they lick your hand. I sometimes think I like to have the Hesperides estate surmounted by an enormous statue to the god of building societies. It would be a queer sort of god. God not capitalized. George Orwell gangsta. Among other things, it would be bisexual. The top half would be a managing director, and the bottom half would be a wife in the family way. In one hand, it would carry an enormous key, the key of the workhouse, of course, and in the other, what do they call those things, like French horns, with presents coming out of them? A cornucopia, out of which would be pouring portable radios, life insurance policies, false teeth, aspirins, French letters, and concrete garden rollers. As a matter of fact, in Ellesmere Road, we don't own our houses, even when we finish paying for them. They're not a freehold, only leasehold. They're priced at $550 payable over a period of 16 years, and they're a class of house, which, if you bought them for cash down, would cost around $380. That represents a profit of $170 for the Cheerful Credit, but nevertheless to say, the Cheerful Credit makes a lot more out of than that. $380 including the builder's profit, but the Cheerful Credit, under the name of Wilson and Bloom Buildings, the house itself, and scoops the building profit. All it has to pay for is the material, but it also scoops the profit on the materials because under the name of Brooks and Scatterby, it sells itself the bricks, tiles, doors, window frames, sand, concrete, and I think glass. And it wouldn't altogether surprise me to learn that under yet another alias, it sells itself the timber to make the doors and window frames. Also, and this was something which was really might have foreseen, though it gave us all a knock when we discovered it, the Cheerful Credit doesn't always keep its end of the bargain. When Ellesmere Road was built, it gave on some open fields, nothing very wonderful, but good for the kids to play in, known as Platt's Meadows. There was nothing in black and white, but it had always been understood that Platt's Meadows weren't to be built on. However, West Bletchley was a growing suburb. Rothwell's jam factory had opened in 28, and Anglo-American all-steel bicycle factory started in 33, and the population was increasing and the rents were going up. I've never seen Sir Herbert Crumb or any other of the big noses of the Cheerful Credit in the flesh, but in my mind's I could see their mouths watering. Suddenly the builders arrived, and the houses began to go up on Platt's Meadow. There was a howl of agony from the Hesperides, and a tenants' defense association was set up. No use. Crumb's lawyers had knocked the stuffing out of us in 5 minutes, and Platt's Meadows were built over. But the really subtle swindle, the one that makes me feel old Crumb deserves his baronetcy, is the mental one. Merely because of the illusion that we own our houses and have what's called a stake in the country. We poor saps and a Hesperides and all such places are turned into Crumb's devoted slaves forever. We've all respectable households, that's to say, Tories, yes-men, and bumsuckers, daren't kill the goose that lay the gilded eggs. And the fact that actually we aren't householders, that we are all in the middle of paying for our houses and eaten up with the ghastly fear that something might happen before we've been made the last payment, merely increasing the effect. We're all bout, and what's more, we've bought with our money. We've one of these poor, down-troubled bastards sweating his guts out to pay twice the proper price for a brick doll's house that's called Bellevue because there's no view and the bell doesn't ring. Every one of those poor suckers would die on the field of battle to save this country from Bolshevism. I turned down Wallop Road and got into the High Street. There's a train to London at 10:14. I was just passing the sixpenny bazaar when I remembered the metal note I'd made that morning to buy a packet of razor blades. When I got the soap counter, the floor manager, or whatever his proper title was cursing the girl in charge there. Generally, There aren't many people in the sixpenny an hour of this morning. Sometimes if you go in just after opening time, you see all the girls lined up in a row and giving their morning curse, just to get them into a trim for the day. They say these big chain stores have chaps with special powers of sarcasm and abuse who are sent from branch to branch to ginger the girls up. The floor manager was an ugly little devil, undersized with very square shoulders and a spiky gray mustache. He just pounced on her about something, some mistake in the change evidently, and was going for her with a voice like a circular saw. Anyway, it went something like that, and even at the time it started me thinking. There you have it, you see. That's how some people are expected to behave. But how about a chap like me? Suppose Hilda went off for a week and end with somebody else. Not that I'd care a damn, and in fact, I would rather please me to find that she'd still got that much kick left in her. But suppose I did care. Would I fling myself down in paroxysm of weeping? Would anyone expect me to? You couldn't with a figure like mine. It would be downright obscene. The train was running along an embankment. A little below us, you could see the roofs of the houses stretching on and on. The little red roofs where the bombs are going to drop, a bit lighted up at the moment because a ray of sunshine was catching them. Funny how we keep on thinking about bombs. Of course, there's no question that it's coming soon. You could tell how close it is by the sheer up stuff they're talking about in the newspaper. I was reading a piece in the New Chronicle the other day where it said that the bombing planes could do any damage nowadays. The anti-aircraft guns have got so good that the bombers had to stay at 20,000 feet. The chap thinking you notice that if an aeroplane's high enough, the bombs don't reach the ground, or more likely that he really meant that they miss Woolwich Arsenal and only hit places like Ellesmere Road. But taking it by and large, I thought it's not just bad to be fat. One thing about being a fat man is that he's always popular. There's really no kind of company, from bookies to bishops, where a fat man doesn't fit in and feel at home. As for women, fat men have more luck with them than people seem to think. It's all bunk to imagine, as some people do, that a woman look on a fat man as a joke. The truth is that a woman doesn't look on any man as a joke if he can kid her that he's in love with her. Mind you, I haven't always been fat. I've been fat for 8 or 9 years, and I suppose I've developed most of the characteristics. But it's also a fact that internally, mentally, I'm not altogether fat. No, don't mistake me. I'm not trying to put myself over a kind of tender flower, the arching heart behind the smiling face, and so forth. You couldn't get on the insurance business if you were anything like that. I'm vulgar, I'm insensitive, and I fit in with the environment. So long as anywhere in the world things are being sold on commission and living are picked up by sheer brass and lack of finer feelings, chaps like me will be doing it. Almost like circumstances, I'd manage to make a living. Always a living and never a fortune. And even in war, revolution, plague, and famine, I'd back myself to stay alive longer than most people. I'm that type, but also I've got something else inside me, chiefly a hangover from the past. I'll tell you about that later. I'm fat, but I'm thin inside. Has it ever struck you that there's a thin man inside every fat man, just as they say there's a statue inside every block of stone? The chap who'd borrowed my matches was having a good pick at his teeth over the express. Legs don't seem to get much fatter, he said. They'll never get him, said the other. Oh, could you identify a pair of legs? They're all the bleeding same, aren't they? Might trace, I'm thought, the piece of papers wrapped them up in, said the first. Down below you could see the roofs of the houses stretched on and on, twisting this way and that with the streets, but stretching on and on, like an enormous plain that you could have ridden over. Whichever way you cross London is 20 miles of houses almost without a break. Christ, how could the bombers miss you when they come? Where we are just one great big bullseye, and no warning, probably because one's going to be such a bloody fool as to declare war nowadays. If I was Hitler, I'd send my bombers across in the middle of a disarmament conference some quiet morning when the clerks are streaming across the London Bridge and the canaries singing and the old woman's pegging the bloomers on the line. Zoom, whiz, plonk. Houses going into the air, bloomers soaked with blood, canaries singing us above the corpses. Seems a pity somehow, I thought. I looked at the great sea of roofs stretching on and on, miles and miles of streets, fried fish shops, tin chapels, picture houses, little printing shops on back alleys, factories, blocks of flats, Whelk stalls, the dairies, power stations, on and on and on. Enormous, and the peacefulness of it, like a great wilderness with no wild beasts, no gun firing, nobody chuckling, pineapples, nobody beating anybody else with a rubber truncheon. If you come to think of it, in the whole of England, at the moments where probably isn't a single bedroom window from which anyone's firing a machine gun. But how about 5 years from now, or 2 years, or 1 year? They gonna shoot you, buddy. Thus ends the reading. Two-layered clerks with black bags were keeping up conversation full of legal baloney that was meant to impress the rest of us and show that they didn't belong to the common herd. I was watching the backs of the houses sliding past. The line from West Bletchley runs most of the way through slums, but it's kind of peaceful. The glimpses you get of little backyards with bits of flowers stuck in boxes in the flat roofs where the women peg out the washing and the bird cage on the wall. The great black bombing plane swayed a little in the air and zoomed ahead so that I couldn't see it. I was sitting with my back to the engine. One of the commercials cocked his eye at it for just a second. I knew what he was thinking. For the matters, it was everybody else's thinking. You don't have to be highbrow to think such thoughts nowadays. In 2 years' time, 1 year's time, what shall we be doing when we see one of those things? Making a dive for the cellar, wetting our bags with fright. The commercial bloke put down his Daily Mail. Templegate's winners come in, he said. The lawyer clerks were sprouting some learnt rot about free, simple, and peppercorns. The other commercials felt at his waistcoat pocket and turned out a bent woodbine. He felt it in the other pocket and then leaned across to me. Got a match, Tubby? I felt for my match. Tubby, you notice, that's interesting. Really, for about a couple of minutes, I stopped thinking about bombs and began thinking about my figure as I studied it in my bath that morning. It's quite true, I'm tubby. In fact, my upper body is almost exactly the shape of a tub. But that's interesting, I think, is that merely because you happened to be a little fat, almost everyone, even a total stranger, will take it for granted to give you a nickname. That's an insulting comment on your personal appearance. Suppose a chap was a hunchback or had a squint or a hare lip. Would you give him a nickname to remind him of it? But every fat man's labeled as a matter of course. I'm the type that people automatically slap on the back and punch in the ribs, and nearly all of them think I'm like it. I never go into the saloon bar or of the Crown at Poultry. I pass their way once a week on business, without the ass waters who travel for the sea foam soap. People but who's more or less a permanency at the saloon for the Crown, prodding me in the ribs and singing out, "Here's a sheer hulk lies poor Tom Bowling," which is a joke the bloody fools in the bar never get tired of. Water he's got fingered like a bar of iron. They all think a fat man doesn't have any feelings. The commercials look another of my matches to pick his teeth with and chuck the box back. The train whistled on to an iron bridge. Down below, I got a glimpse of a baker's van and a long string of lorries loaded with cement. The queer thing, I was thinking, is that in a way, they're right about fat men. It's a fact that fat men, particularly a man who's been fat from birth, from childhood, that's to say, isn't quite like other men. He goes through his life on a different plane, a sort of light comedy plane, though in the case of blokers and sideshows at fairs, or in fact anyone who's 20 stone, it isn't so much light comedy as low farce. I've been both fat and thin in my life, and I know the difference fatness makes to your outlook. It kind of prevents you from taking things too hard. I doubt whether a man who never been about anything but fat, a man who's been called fatty ever since he could walk, even knows of the existence of any real deep emotions. How could he? He's got no experience of such things. He can't even be present at a tragic scene, because a scene where there's a fat man present, it's tragic, it's comic. Just imagine a fat Hamlet, for instance, or Olive Hardy acting Romeo. Funnily enough, I've been thinking something of the kind only a few days earlier when I was reading a novel I've got out of books. Wasted Passion, it was called. The chap in the story finds out that the girl has gone off with another chap. He's one of these chaps you read about in novels. They have pale, sensitive faces and dark hair and a private income. I remember more or less how the passage went. David paced up and down the room, his hands pressed to his forehead. The news seemed to have stunned him. For a long time he could not believe it. Sheila untrue to him. It could not be. Suddenly realization rushed over him, and he saw the fact all its stark horror. It was too much. He flung himself down in a paroxysm of weeping.